Can you,
Alicia, good to see you.
hi, can you explain what business brokerage is? I'm on the residential side and this is new to me, so I just want to get an overview of what you do and how it can help me with referrals and things like that.
Okay, perfect. So as you're driving, let's say you're driving down, Main Street, any city, USA, and there's a whole bunch of different businesses on both sides of the street. And, you drive past a corner strip mall. Maybe that building has 8 businesses in it. Okay. So a commercial real estate person typically would sell the strip mall, because a strip mall is typically going to be owned by one person, maybe an LLC or a business entity or whatever, but it's got typically one owner. If there's 8 different businesses in there, maybe there's an auto repair shop and there's a cigar shop and a flower shop and a bakery and, a little food place, whatever. Each of those small businesses is owned by a different owner. And a business broker is who is going to sell those businesses. So as business brokers, we're typically probably 95% of the time when we're selling a business, they don't own the real estate and we're not selling the real estate with it. We're just selling the business, the business assets to a new owner who hopefully will retain the employees and continue operating that business and continue serving the community. Right. So that's kind of what we do as business brokers. And the difference between how businesses are sold and how property is sold is that business sales typically are very confidential. And also, when you have in a business transaction, buyer and seller always meet. They always, not only do they always meet, they typically work together for about 3 or 4 weeks after the transaction. You have a transition period. So that's something that's very different from real estate, because in real estate, buyer and seller typically have no reason to ever meet each other. But in business, they always do. And so there are some additional issues that crop up because ultimately, the personalities have to mesh, or they at least have to be respectful of each other so they can work together to create that successful transition. Because if one of them is really overly abrasive, it's not going to be a good transition, and most likely it'll end up in the courtroom after that.
Is there a business broker on both sides, or is it one person representing both sides?
Most of the time, there's only one business broker involved, unless you're in Florida.
Okay.
Florida has the Florida Business Broker Association has their own MLS. And so they require all their members to put everything into the MLS. And so because of that, Florida tends to have agents on both sides of the transaction more frequently than anywhere else in the country.
Okay.
In most of the other states, typically, because business sales is confidential, as a broker, you're typically start with representing a seller. You're representing a business owner that wants to retire or that wants to sell for some other reason. As you're marketing that business, because because everything is confidential, any buyer who is interested in that business is going to submit an inquiry that comes to you directly as the listing broker. And so at that point, you're going to send the buyer a confidentiality agreement and all that. But most of the time, on occasion, buyer will have their own broker. Most of the time they do not. And it becomes very tough to get paid if you're representing a buyer, because there's not a lot of fee sharing in business brokerage the way there is in residential real estate, which probably might be a good thing under the circumstances when you look at the lawsuit that just happened with NAR and everything else. So yeah, I mean, in general, if a buyer has their own broker, the buyer needs to be willing to pay their broker's fees. And if they're not willing to do so, then typically that's why a lot of business brokers that are seasoned don't represent buyers, because it just, it becomes very, very difficult to get compensated. And, unless you're independently wealthy, we all need to get paid for the work that we do, right?